They pointed at her in the middle of the hangar. Not a pilot, not an officer. A black woman holding a broom, frozen under the cold steel lights of a military base. Captain Andrew Whitmore smiled as the laughter rolled in, sharp and cruel, turning humiliation into entertainment. To them, she was just a janitor who didn't know her place, someone to mock, someone to remind of boundaries. What no one at Falcon Ridge Air Base knew was this. The woman they were forcing toward a fighter jet had once commanded a machine worth hundreds of millions of dollars at combat altitude. For 8 years, she buried that truth, swallowed every insult, and mastered the art of being invisible. But today, they pushed too far. And before this hangar goes silent, one question will hang in the air. What happens when you judge a human being only by the job you see? If you've ever been underestimated, take a second to subscribe. This story was made for you. For 8 years, Maya Carter existed in the margins of Falcon Ridge Air Base. Not officially, of course. Her badge scanned, her paycheck cleared, her footsteps echoed every morning before dawn. But as far as the people who mattered were concerned, she wasn't really there. She was 43 years old, a level 1 janitor in a place that worshipped rank, medals, and last names carved into legacy. To them, she was background noise, a moving shadow pushing a broom across concrete floors that never quite stayed clean. Every day followed by the same quiet ritual. The broom moved, the dust lifted, the floor shined. Her eyes stayed down. Not from shame, but from calculation. Maya had learned early that eye contact invited commentary. That silence deflected attention. That invisibility, when mastered, could be a form of control. Officers walked past her without slowing down. Conversations about flight hours and promotions flowing right through her like air. 8 years, and not one of them ever asked her name. Captain Andrew Whitmore never noticed the work she did, only the space she occupied. To him, she was proof that the system worked exactly as intended. He wore his authority like it had been stitched into his uniform at birth. Third-generation military, elite schools, doors that opened before he even knocked. Whitmore moved through the base with the casual confidence of a man who had never been questioned and never expected to be. When he spoke, people listened. When he laughed, others joined in. And when his eyes landed on Maya, they didn't see a person. They saw a position. Low, replaceable, silent. Maya felt those glances without ever returning them. She had become an expert at absorbing disrespect without reacting, at letting words fall to the floor like dust she would later sweep away. Not because she agreed with them, but because she understood something most people at Falcon Ridge never would. Power reveals itself in restraint. Intelligence shows up in timing. And survival, real survival, often means choosing when not to fight. So she kept moving, step by step, sweep by sweep. While others shouted orders and measured their worth in stripes and titles, Maya measured time. 8 years of watching, 8 years of listening, 8 years of learning exactly who people were when they believed no one important was paying attention. The idea didn't come from nowhere. It was born over cheap drinks and loud laughter the night before, in a bar just outside the base where rank felt heavier and consequences felt distant. Someone joked, someone else pushed it further. And Captain Andrew Whitmore smiled, because humiliation was his favorite kind of entertainment when it came with an audience. By morning, the joke had turned into a plan. Put the janitor in a fighter jet. Film it. Let the internet do the rest. Lieutenant Lucas Reed loved the idea instantly. He could already see the thumbnail in his head. The caption, the comments, a cleaning lady pretending to be a pilot. The kind of clip that spread faster than facts, faster than shame. He checked his phone battery twice, imagining views climbing by the thousands. This wasn't just a prank. This was content. And content, in his world, meant relevance. When Whitmore called Maya over, his voice carried just enough volume to draw a crowd. Not an official order, a performance. Officers slowed their steps. Mechanics glanced up. Phones appeared in hands. Maya felt the shift immediately, that subtle tightening in the air when people decide someone else is about to become the show. She stood there, broom still in hand, while Whitmore explained the rules with a grin that never reached his eyes. Get in the cockpit. Pretend you know what you're doing. Give us a laugh. They expected resistance, confusion, fear. What they got instead unsettled them far more. Maya didn't argue, didn't ask questions, didn't look around for help. She simply nodded once and accepted the flight gear when it was shoved into her hands. No hesitation, no protest, just quiet compliance, as if this humiliation had already been accounted for. As she stepped into the oversized flight suit, something slipped past their notice. Her hands moved with calm precision, fingers tightening straps, adjusting buckles, smoothing fabric with practiced ease. Not rushed, not clumsy, automatic, the kind of movement that comes from muscle memory, not instruction. Reed kept filming, laughing under his breath, completely unaware that the camera was already capturing the first crack in their joke. Whitmore gestured theatrically toward the jet, soaking in the attention. This was his stage, his moment. Maya walked forward without looking at him, her face unreadable, her posture steady. To everyone watching, she was surrendering. What they didn't understand was that she wasn't submitting at all. She was stepping exactly where they told her to stand. And sometimes, that's where the trap is set. The ladder felt colder than she remembered, metal against her, palms, solid and familiar in a way nothing else at Falcon Ridge ever had. As Maya Carter climbed toward the F-16, the noise of the hangar began to fade, as if the world itself was pulling back to give her space. Every step upward stripped away another layer of the woman they thought they knew, the janitor, the shadow, the silence. By the time she reached the cockpit, only muscle memory remained. The moment she lowered herself into the seat, something shifted. The cockpit didn't feel foreign. It didn't feel borrowed. It wrapped around her like a body she had once lived inside and never truly left. Her hands found the controls without searching. Her shoulders adjusted naturally. Her breathing slowed, steady and deliberate. For a fraction of a second, the years collapsed. The broom disappeared. The floor vanished. And Captain Phoenix Carter came rushing back with the force of a suppressed heartbeat. She remembered the first time she flew alone. The pressure at altitude, the sound of the engine vibrating through her bones. The discipline it took to stay calm when the sky turned hostile. Back then, she wasn't invisible. She was trusted, respected, feared even. Phoenix, they had called her, because she never went down without rising stronger. Those memories didn't come gently. They flooded her senses, sharp and precise, as if they had been waiting for permission to breathe again. Below her, Captain Whitmore was still talking, still joking, still performing for the cameras. But his voice began to falter. He couldn't explain it, not yet. But something about the way she sat unsettled him. This wasn't how nervous people moved. This wasn't how someone pretending to belong carried themselves. Maya's spine straightened, her chin lifted, and the cockpit became silent in a way that demanded attention. Her fingers hovered over the controls, not touching, just remembering, like a pianist pausing before the first note after years of forced silence. She closed her eyes for half a breath, not in fear, in recognition. This wasn't a prank anymore. It was a reunion. And for the first time since he pointed at her with that smug smile, Captain Whitmore felt a chill crawl up his spine. He had wanted a joke. What he was getting felt dangerously close to something else. The first sound cut through the hangar sharper than laughter ever could. Engines responding instantly, clean and precise, no hesitation, no wasted motion. A few heads turned, then more. The older mechanics were the first to notice. The ones who had spent decades listening to machines tell the truth long before people did. This wasn't the sloppy stumble of someone guessing. This was a flawless ignition sequence, executed with the quiet confidence of someone who had done it 1,000 times. Hands paused mid-task, wrenches lowered. One mechanic narrowed his eyes, watching the cockpit through years of experience instead of prejudice. Perfect timing, optimal throttle control, no unnecessary corrections. That wasn't luck. Luck sounded rough. This sounded disciplined, deliberate. Then the radio came alive, clear, calm, standard NATO phrasing, delivered without a single wasted word. No hesitation, no informal tone. Exactly the way it's drilled into pilots after years of training and real-world pressure. A younger tech muttered under his breath that she must have memorized it. The veteran didn't respond. He was too busy feeling a chill settle in his chest. Memorization didn't explain cadence. It didn't explain confidence. And it definitely didn't explain why her voice sounded like it belonged there. Captain Whitmore's smile finally slipped. He opened his mouth to regain control, to turn this back into a joke, but the moment had already started moving without him. The jet began to taxi, slow, straight, perfect alignment. Every correction so subtle it was almost invisible. The aircraft moved like an extension of her body, responding before commands were fully formed. That's when the whispers started, low, uneasy, the kind that spread fast because no one wanted to be the first to say it out loud. Someone had seen this before, years ago, a style you don't forget once it burns into your memory, the way the plane obeyed her without protest, the way she anticipated its weight, its balance, its limits. Whitmore barked orders, louder now, sharper, but his voice felt thin against the growing certainty in the hangar. This was no janitor guessing her way through a machine. This was mastery, revealing itself one controlled movement at a time. And as the jet rolled forward under her command, a single question settled into every experienced mind watching her. Who is she? 8 years earlier, her name meant something very different. Captain Phoenix Carter, the first black woman to command an elite fighter squadron in modern Air Force history. Not a symbol, not a quota, a tactician, a leader trusted with lives and machines designed to dominate the sky. When Phoenix flew, pilots listened. When she spoke, command took notes. She had earned every inch of that authority the hard way, through missions where hesitation meant death and precision meant survival. It was during a classified operation known internally as Black Dagger that everything unraveled. A high-risk reconnaissance flight over a hostile zone, the kind of mission that never made headlines but shaped wars behind closed doors. Phoenix noticed something that didn't add up. Flight paths altered without explanation, cargo manifests quietly edited, encrypted transmissions that didn't match their stated objectives. While others followed orders, she asked questions. And those questions led her to a truth powerful people were desperate to bury. General William Hawthorne, a decorated war hero on paper, a patriot in speeches, and behind the curtain, a man funneling advanced weapons through shell networks to groups the United States publicly claimed to be fighting. Phoenix documented everything: names, coordinates, transfers. She did exactly what the system claimed it wanted its officers to do. She reported it up the chain. That was her mistake. Within weeks, the narrative flipped. Evidence disappeared. New documents surfaced, poorly forged but stamped with authority. Witnesses changed their stories overnight. The charge came down swift and devastating, leaking classified intelligence to the enemy. Treason, the very crime she had uncovered. Phoenix went from national asset to liability in a single briefing room meeting she was never allowed to attend. The media swallowed the story whole. Command distanced itself. Former allies went silent. Her squadron was reassigned, her commendations quietly removed from records, her name erased from official histories like it had never existed. Phoenix Carter didn't just lose her rank, she lost her identity. In a system built on loyalty and image, she was too dangerous to keep alive publicly. So, she disappeared, not dead, not imprisoned, just removed, reclassified, buried under paperwork and silence. The Air Force didn't need her gone physically, it only needed her forgotten. And for 8 years, that's exactly what happened. Captain Phoenix Carter became Maya Carter, janitor, her past sealed behind locked files and political favors, her legacy traded for convenience. History rewritten by those who feared what she knew. But secrets don't die, they wait. And as the jet rolled forward under her steady control, that buried name stirred again. Phoenix was never destroyed. She was stored, preserved beneath layers of humiliation and patience. And now, inside a cockpit she had once ruled, the truth was preparing to surface whether the system liked it or not. The control tower didn't notice at first. It rarely did when arrogance was loud enough on the ground, but General Robert Hayes had been watching longer than most, binoculars resting against his chest, eyes trained not on the crowd, but on the way the aircraft moved. Not fast, not flashy, correct. Every motion deliberate, every pause intentional. His jaw tightened. He had seen that rhythm before, years ago. In another life, the Air Force preferred to forget. On the tarmac, Captain Whitmore's confidence began to fracture. His voice sharpened as he barked into the radio, issuing orders that overlapped and contradicted each other. "Shut it down! Step away from the controls! Do you hear me?" The words spilled out faster, the less control he felt he had. Officers looked at one another. Mechanics stopped pretending this was funny. The joke had turned against its creator. Hayes lowered the binoculars slowly. "Open a secure channel," he said, his voice calm in a room that had gone tense. "Now." An aide hesitated, glancing toward Whitmore's frantic gestures below. "Sir, Captain Whitmore says she's just a janitor." Hayes didn't even look at him. Captain Whitmore wouldn't recognize real skill if it signed his evaluation in ink. "Open the channel." The line clicked. Silence stretched. "Unidentified pilot, this is General Hayes. Identify yourself." For a moment, nothing. Then a breath, steady, controlled. "Sir, this is Maya Carter, civilian maintenance." A pause. "Phoenix Carter died 8 years ago." The words landed heavier than any shout ever could. Hayes closed his eyes, just for a second. Phoenix. The name carried weight he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. He remembered the investigation, the missing files, the orders that came from above with no signatures. He remembered knowing something was wrong and being told, very clearly, to let it go. When he opened his eyes, his voice was quieter, but it carried authority Whitmore could only dream of. "Phoenix, is it really you?" Below, Whitmore's face drained of color. He grabbed another radio, shouting over the open frequencies, demanding control, threatening consequences, invoking regulations he barely understood. No one responded. Power was moving away from him, and he could feel it slipping through his fingers. In the cockpit, Maya's hands never trembled. "Yes, sir," she said. "The past doesn't stay buried forever. If you got chills right now," comment Phoenix below, "because what you're witnessing isn't disobedience. It's a reckoning." The clearance came through without ceremony, but it carried the weight of a verdict. Unrestricted flight authorization, full airspace, no limitations. For a split second, the base held its breath. Then the engines changed tone. Deeper, hungrier. The sound rolled across Falcon Ridge like thunder waking something ancient and angry. Maya eased the jet into position at the end of the runway. Movements calm, precise, almost reverent. 8 years of silence pressed into a single moment. She wasn't just lining up a takeoff. She was aligning history. On the ground, Whitmore stared upward, his mouth slightly open, every instinct screaming that this had gone far beyond his control. Cameras kept rolling. Phones went live. Somewhere across the world, notifications began to explode. The jet surged forward. Acceleration slammed observers back on their heels. In seconds, the runway vanished beneath her. The F-16 climbed like it had been waiting for her return. At altitude, Maya didn't hesitate. She pulled hard, sharp, deliberate, and the impossible unfolded in front of hundreds of stunned witnesses. The aircraft snapped into a Pugachev's Cobra, nose straight up, forward motion nearly frozen. Gravity seemed to lose its grip as the jet hung there, suspended by pure mastery. Gasps rippled through the base. Veteran pilots grabbed binoculars with shaking hands. That maneuver wasn't in training manuals. It was a signature, a declaration. The jet recovered smoothly, rolling back into flight as if physics had simply agreed to step aside. On screens around the world, the live feed spiked. Tens of thousands, then hundreds of thousands. Comments poured in faster than moderators could read them. "Who is this pilot? That can't be real." That's Phoenix. Maya wasn't finished. She dove low, skimming the edge of the base, engines screaming past the sound barrier, then pulled vertical again, carving arcs through the sky with ruthless elegance. Each maneuver flowed into the next, a choreography of power and control that blurred the line between machine and human. This wasn't showing off. This was testimony. High above, contrails began to form. At first, they looked random, then intentional. Stroke by stroke, letter by letter, the sky itself became a canvas. PHOENIX. Written in white against endless blue. A name erased from records, but now impossible to ignore. The crowd erupted. Some cheered, some cried, some just stared, knowing they were watching something that would be replayed for decades. Across the globe, live stream counters climbed into the millions. News desks scrambled, social feeds flooded. A janitor flying a fighter jet became the headline, then the footnote, then the lie that collapsed under truth. Back on the tarmac, Whitmore dropped his radio. His reflection stared back at him from a darkened screen, small and powerless. Above them all, Maya leveled out, steady and unshaken. The sky had heard her verdict, and the world was listening. When the roar finally faded, the silence felt heavier than the noise ever had. It pressed down on the runway, on the hangar, on every man who had laughed just minutes earlier. Captain Andrew Whitmore stood frozen, his authority bleeding out in real time. He shouted orders no one followed. He grabbed radios that stayed dead. The uniform that once made him untouchable now looked like a costume stripped of meaning. Phones vibrated nonstop. Screens refreshed faster than reality could keep up. The hashtag appeared almost instantly, brutal in its simplicity. Phoenix Janitor. Millions of views turned into tens of millions before anyone could catch their breath. Clips replayed from every angle. The broom, the cockpit, the sky spelling a name the Air Force tried to erase. Comment sections exploded with disbelief, admiration, rage. The narrative Whitmore thought he controlled had slipped from his hands and gone global. He tried one last time, one final protest. "She's not authorized." "This proves nothing." But the words sounded weak even to him. Power doesn't announce when it leaves. It just stops responding. Around him, officers avoided eye contact. Mechanics stared openly now, no longer pretending. Whitmore wasn't being punished yet. He was being exposed, and that was worse. Above them, Maya brought the jet back with surgical calm. No drama, no excess, a descent so smooth it felt intentional, like punctuation at the end of a sentence that had been building for 8 years. The wheels kissed the runway with barely a whisper. Perfect alignment, perfect control. The kind of landing instructors point to when they talk about mastery, not luck. As the jet rolled to a stop, people moved closer without realizing it, drawn in, compelled. The cockpit canopy opened slowly, deliberately. Maya stepped down onto the tarmac with the same quiet dignity she had carried while cleaning floors no one thanked her for. The difference now was unmistakable. Heads bowed, voices lowered. Respect, real respect, filled the space Whitmore's authority had once occupied. Behind her, the numbers kept climbing. 50 million views, and rising. The world had made its judgment, and for the first time in his life, Captain Andrew Whitmore understood what it felt like to be invisible. The applause never really came. What filled the air instead was something heavier, reflection. Maya stood on the tarmac facing men who had spent their lives believing authority was permanent, believing uniforms could shield character. General Hayes approached her with measured steps, carrying a folder thick with seals and signatures. Restoration of rank, immediate reinstatement, command of any squadron she chose. The system, finally caught in its own contradiction, was offering back what it had stolen. Maya didn't reach for the folder. She looked past it, past the cameras, past the officers suddenly eager to be seen on the right side of history. For 8 years, she had imagined this moment. The apology, the correction, the neat resolution that would make everything make sense again. But standing there, she understood something deeper. Rank had never been the source of her worth, and losing it had never erased who she was. "No," she said calmly, "not now, not like this." Her voice carried without force, steady and unbreakable. "I didn't survive 8 years of silence to be restored by the same system that buried the truth." A murmur rippled through the crowd. This was not the ending they expected. It was something more unsettling. Then she reached into her jacket and removed a small data drive. Everything changed in that instant. Names, transactions, recordings, confessions made by dying men who believed the truth would never leave the room. Evidence collected patiently, methodically, while floors were scrubbed and insults ignored. Maya handed it to Hayes without ceremony. "This is General Hawthorne's network. Offshore accounts, weapons transfers, political protection, and the Whitmore family's fingerprints are on all of it." Hayes didn't argue. He didn't question her credibility. He had already seen what truth looked like when it moved freely. Within hours, investigations ignited. Within days, accounts were frozen, careers dismantled, legacies shattered. The Whitmore name, once spoken with entitlement, became synonymous with corruption. Captain Andrew Whitmore wasn't just relieved of command. He was exposed as the beneficiary of a machine built on betrayal and blood. Maya watched none of it with satisfaction. Justice, she understood, wasn't revenge. It was correction. The world didn't need to see her rise again in uniform. It needed to see power stripped from those who abused it. As the sun lowered over Falcon Ridge, Maya turned away from the base without looking back. She hadn't reclaimed her past. She had outgrown it. And in doing so, she forced the truth into the light where it could no longer be buried. 3 months later, Falcon Ridge was quiet again. The kind of quiet that follows a storm when everything familiar has been rearranged. Maya Carter never returned in uniform. She didn't need to. Instead, she built something the system that broke her could never imagine creating. Phoenix Aviation Academy, a place where talent mattered more than last names, where discipline mattered more than privilege, where the sky belonged to those willing to earn it. Young men and women from backgrounds once dismissed as unsuitable now sat in simulators, hands steady, eyes forward, learning what it meant to fly with honor. When asked why she turned down command, Maya answered without hesitation. Power that depends on recognition can be taken away. Power built on identity cannot. The cameras captured her calm, not triumphant, not bitter, just resolved. She had learned what 8 years of invisibility was worth. It taught her patience. It taught her clarity. It taught her that being underestimated wasn't a curse. It was leverage. Captain Whitmore's name faded into case files and cautionary briefings. Phoenix Carter's name returned, not as a headline, but as a standard. A reminder etched into the memory of a nation that had almost forgotten what competence really looked like. In her office, a single photo hangs on the wall. A woman stepping out of a fighter jet, helmet in hand, eyes steady. No caption needed, because the lesson speaks for itself. Being underestimated is not a sentence. It's an advantage. If stories like this move you, stay with us. Subscribe to the channel and don't miss the stories where injustice becomes fuel and dignity turns into power.